orgullo. It means something to be proud of, something that we can leave a legacy here in the community for everyone to enjoy.
I've been thinking about a museum for a long time. This building initially was the Chicano Federation, and they were moving, and this was about 1979-80. And I met with the representative from the city of San Diego, along with Jose Gomez, negotiated this building because the steering committee at the time was in here. We stayed in here for about 3 months after the Federation moved out. They said that they would let us know when they would build the building for the Adult and Continuing Education Center. We just didn't know it was going to take 35 years. I felt at the time, and I still feel, that as an educational institution, our community needs to know about the history of Chicano Park and the history of Logan Heights in the city of San Diego. This was not a park. It was a site that was going to be a highway patrol station, and the community stood up against that effort to create the park. So thinking along those lines and negotiating this building back, I began the incorporation process of the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center, focusing on art, history, and science.
I think it has always been the vision of Josephine Talamantes to give our community a voice and to validate our stories and our place in the city of San Diego.
And the vision and the beginning of looking at the mission of this museum was really in words, preserving the history of the struggle. And I would also share the resilience of the people that were in that struggle over 50 years ago to create this park. And also that it'll educate individuals and empower them to look at their own communities and to be activists and visionaries for the future.
When I think about those who were part of the land takeover on April 22nd, 1970, it really spoke to people who had had enough of being erased and not being given a voice, and decided to take matters into their own hands and begin to document their history. So I see the museum as an extension of that action, where by telling our story and by telling our history, we are actually moving in the direction of affirming our place and actually of healing our communities.
The lessons that I've learned from some of my mentors, the importance of being a principled person, the importance of maintaining our integrity, the importance of not letting anybody else define who we would be. And that whole struggle was called struggle for self-determination, and that still exists today. We were radicals, we were revolutionary, we were fighting for change, and that day it looked nothing like it looks today. It was, early on, the takeover had just happened, the pillars were barren, there were people, working around the park. But I was moved, not by the beauty of the murals that weren't there, I was moved by the activism of the people, that there was poetry being taught, that there was danzante going on, there was a place for the lowriders to hang out, and that this was a place that, was a home, where it was okay to be Chicano. The whole concept of the park, even though it's a very small piece of land, was very symbolic of the struggle of us as a people, that we're a land-based people.
when we open this first exhibition, it'll be a narrative to begin with. And then we hope to move on and do some visual arts exhibition in this beautiful gallery. We're hoping that we tap into those that have been in this community for many years, you know, the music, the lowriders, Danza Azteca or the Ballet Folklorico or the Brown Berets or Unión del Barrio, Chicano Park Steering Committee, or any of the other groups and organizations that have supported us along the way.
The idea of the exhibit came from our leader and organizer for so many years, and that is Tommy or Tomasa Camarillo, who from the very beginning has been the voice of keeping us organized and keeping our feet on the ground as we continue to do the important work of Chicano Park. So therefore, one of the things that she would always tell us and continues to tell us to this day, that everything that we have in our park, we've had to fight for it. It's always been a struggle. So what we want to do with our opening exhibit as a way to bring recognition to our park and to our museum is to look at all the various groups that have emerged as a result of that vision of struggle. The lowrider community, the Brown Berets, the Danza group, the youth, so many people who have played such a key role in giving us a sense of identity, a sense of history.
Tommy was very adamant about using her collection for the community and making it accessible and free. She, you know, when she grew up, she didn't have an education. She didn't go through, finish high school, and she didn't get a college degree. But everything she learned it on her own. She learned how to use a computer. She learned how to archive. She learned how to binder. And it was funny because as we got older, these higher education institutions are reaching out to her to try to acquire her collection that she built herself. And she always said no. They'd offer her $2,000. There were times where we really could have used that money, and she still said no because her goal was to make sure it was in the hands of the people. So now, to be here 52 years later and to see where we're at with the museum, and for us to be able to partner with the museum and host the collection here, it's an honor. And it's her goal because that was her dream. Her dream was always make it accessible. A museum for the people, by the people, grassroots. And we started that way. We started, you know, with a clipboard saying, this is our dream. You want to sign on? Can you sign on to this? Do you have $1? Do you have $5? We were at La Vuelta. We were at Bread and Salt. And before we even had the building solidified, people believed in that dream. And that's how we got where we're at today.
One of the things that we are really excited about and offering to the community at large is being a part of Los Primeros, which are, in translation, the first. And we welcome people to join the Primeros, and through the funding of their support, whatever that might be, their contributions, we will be able to continue with our funding as a nonprofit to open the museum.
This museum needs to be built and function on our guiding principles of self-determination. Now, Los Primeros, the idea came actually from the United Farm Workers. And there was a button that we used to wear that identified who were the original people of the Union. And so bringing that concept to the museum, we wanted to bring it here in the sense that who were the people with us before the museum opened? And that's what it was with the farm workers. Who were members of the Union before it was popular? See, once the museum opens, everybody's going to want to be a part of it. But the people who had faith in the dream, people who gave contributions, we want that to be recognized. We want this to be a grassroots effort. So any contribution that you make, whether it's $1, 100, 1,000, or 1 million, you know, your name won't be any bigger or smaller based on your contribution. What it'll be is a recognition of all the people that believed in the museum before it opened.
Right now, probably the easiest way to become a part of the Primeros, I would just suggest that you go to ChicanoParkMuseum.org, and there's a way to look at the information around Chicano Park and see some videos, and then there's a donation part that you can go ahead and just do that through the website.
Shall continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend. We shall continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight.
this museum to me gives me hope that the ideas that were born during our the inception of our movement will never die. That this building here, even though that's the largest open air museum outside, there are so many archives, so many stories, so many things that need to be said that can't be done in the park, and this makes it a perfect place to do that.
This museum is such an important piece of the puzzle for this community, mainly because one of our biggest concerns, at least for me, is that we need to tell our own history. And I've always said this, that unless we document and unless we tell our own history, somebody else is going to do it for you. Somebody else from the outside usually comes, and whoever that might be, a professional, an academic, or whatever, and they usually tell it from a different perspective. They see it from a different lens. So I think it's so important for us that are active here in the community to tell our own history. So my dream for this museum is specifically that, for us to have a venue where we can tell our own stories, where this documentation be here for the generations to come. Our reality is that many of us that have been involved with this park, with Chicano Park specifically, we're not getting any younger. And slowly, our generation is disappearing. So for us to try to capture that, so the next generations will learn, hopefully, from our little contribution that we've done throughout the years, that they could pick up the baton and continue.
So with the Chicano movement, the piece has always been making sure that we get our fair share and carving out a space and not being afraid to say that we are Chicano and, tell our experiences and our stories. And with the museum, I hope that continues to be a further extension of that. And I hope the museum, with the conversations that we have here and with the pieces of history that we'll be sharing and displaying here, will serve as a reminder that the movement's not over. It's not an era, it's not a time frame, it's continuous and it's still going, because there's still Chicanos out there that aren't getting equal rights. We see this with our brothers and sisters throughout Aslan, in our sister parks. What they want us to remember is that we're a defeated people, but we're not. We're people who have survived 500 plus years, and we're still here today, and we're standing on our ancestors' shoulders that have fought, that preserved the languages, that have preserved our traditions, and it's us preserving that medicine and preserving the medicine even in terms of education that we hope to be able to inspire these youth, because this is here for the long stay. We don't want to have something start here and then down the line it gets corrupted, it gets politicized, or it becomes different about donors, or we have to make sure that we're at such a high level that we're esteemed. No, we'll be esteemed in our own regard, and we'll be esteemed as far as standards of a museum, but we want to be esteemed in the eyes of the barrio. We want to be esteemed where the community come here and feel safe. We don't want to have our community come in here and feel like they don't belong. And that is commonplace in a lot of these museums.
So the uniqueness will be that families and communities from here have shared this space and this land, which is sacred to many, for generations. And the museum will help to be representative of that and share that history. I think that's a huge uniqueness that we don't always recognize.
To me, the importance is always history, that history not be lost, that it be known, that it be spoken of in a way that it was lived, and speak about the people who made it happen. The elders who are gone now, the ones whose murals show their faces, but their spirits are here. Every time you walk through the park, you can see them, you can feel them, they live within us, and that we can leave that for the children, my grandchildren that are coming up. People that grew up here, that have moved away, that live far away, they can come and see it. They can read about it. They can see this interview and know that it's here and that they're welcome to come back anytime.
We don't have a curriculum that is in the schools that teaches about Chicano Park or the community of Logan Heights. So we're hoping with the museum we're able to also reach the educational components that are not connected to the community currently. So that's going to be a big piece, the education, the science, just having a legitimate space to go to call home and have a roof over the community. There's just so many things that a space like this can do for a community and for artists. And for me, you know, this is a long time coming. We didn't have this. You know, we've never had this here. So I feel that it's gonna allow us to encourage us to try to, you know, get more involved here with the community, with the art shows, with the spaces, and there's gonna be a lot of magic that's gonna happen here. I think as a community as a whole, we're growing instead of losing, or instead of becoming, you know, gentrified. You know, we're growing and we're being resilient, and downtown is coming our way, but we're some way, somehow, this parque, this museum is that force field to protect our community.
So it's assuring to know that the struggles of all of us and the sacrifices of all of us that have made to bring us to where we are today will not just go away. So the museum is sort of an insurance that our story will be continued to be told, and told in our own way.
We're hoping that the children that then begin to frequent the building and the historical significance of our archive and our programming, that they will have a better understanding of what their ancestors or family members contributed to the establishment of Chicano Park. And I think that is important to educate the people at large, because you hear a lot of times the era of the Chicano movement. And I'm thinking, when was the era of Chicano movement ever, when did it ever end? I'm still Chicana, I'm still alive. This museum is still Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. Chicano Park and the monumental murals are still in place. We are not historical artifacts. We are still living today, as the General Jose Montoya in many of his poetry. We're still alive. We're still here.